I'm 63 years old. 2 years ago, I had a paid-off house, almost $500,000 in the bank, and a plan for a peaceful retirement. I could feel the weight of it, that security. It felt like I'd done my job, put in my 35 years on the road, and earned my quiet corner of the world. Today I drive for Uber Eats in the same town I've lived my whole life, and I have exactly $8,400 to my name. People ask me what happened. The ones who are brave enough, anyway. I tell them I made a mistake. That's the simple version, the one that fits between their pity and my shame. But it wasn't one single mistake. It was 100 of them. 100 small, seemingly logical decisions that added up to a $440,000 mistake. A mistake with a 29-year-old name, Anca. And the craziest part, the part that really guts you when you think about it wasn't for a stupid reason. I wasn't a fool throwing money at a fantasy. I thought I was investing in a real future, finally proving something to myself that I needed to prove. I thought I was finally being wanted for more than just my wallet. Turns out, that's all I was ever wanted for. To understand how a man who spent his whole life being careful ends up here, delivering someone else's dinner in the dark, you can't start at the end. We have to go back to the beginning, back to a quiet apartment, a lonely Tuesday night, and the click of a button that set my entire life on fire. Before all of this, before Anca, before Uber Eats, my world was my truck. For 35 years, that was my office, my home, and sometimes my prison. I hauled freight from Ohio to California and back again, and I was good at it. You don't survive that long in that business unless you're reliable. I knew my rig, I knew the roads, and I never missed a deadline. That was my pride. It wasn't exciting, but it was honest, and it paid the bills. It paid for a house, a 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood in Dayton. It paid for everything. And by the time I was 60, it was all paid off. That felt like winning. When I finally sold that house, the title was clean. The check they handed me was for $250,000. I put that right in the bank next to the $200,000 I'd built up in my 401k over the decades. $450,000. That was my number. It wasn't out money, I knew that. But it was security. It was the reward for a lifetime of early mornings and long nights, of truck stop coffee and missed birthdays. I looked at that number and thought, David, you did it. You can finally rest. But rest is a funny thing. It's a lot quieter than you think it's going to be. The divorce had been final for 5 years, but the silence it left behind felt brand new. My ex-wife, when she left, she told me she felt more like a logistics manager than a partner. Said she was tired of planning her life around my schedule, of living with a ghost who was always on the road. That one sentence did more damage than any argument we ever had. It confirmed my deepest fear, that my only value was in the paycheck I brought home, that I was a provider, not a partner, a human ATM. So there I was, 61 years old, living in a small 2-bedroom apartment, surrounded by boxes I never fully unpacked. The constant rumble of the engine I'd lived with for 35 years was gone, replaced by a deep, humming silence. It turns out, when you spend your whole life moving, standing still is the hardest thing in the world. I was lonely, the kind of lonely that feels heavy in your chest. On a Tuesday night, feeling those 4 walls closing in, I saw an ad, an international dating site. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted to talk to someone, to feel like a person again, not just a retiree. I created a profile. A week later, a message appeared. Anca, 29 years old, from Bucharest, Romania. Her pictures were beautiful, but it was her words that got me. I told her I felt old. She said she preferred mature men with wisdom. I told her I lived a simple, quiet life. She said she was tired of irresponsible boys and wanted a stable, serious man. She called me her strong American bear. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt interesting. I felt like more than just a provider. And that feeling was the most expensive thing I've ever bought. We talked every day for 4 months. Every morning I'd wake up, and there'd be a message from her waiting. Good morning, my strong American bear. It sounds so cheesy now, saying it out loud. But at the time, when the quiet in my apartment was the loudest thing you'd ever heard, those words were like a lifeline. She told me about her life in Bucharest, about the university she was supposedly attending, about her dreams of opening a small art gallery one day. I told her about the road, about the sunrises over the Rockies and the diners in the middle of nowhere. For the first time, My boring life felt like a collection of adventures when I told it to her. The trigger, the thing that tipped it all over, wasn't some grand declaration. It was a Tuesday, just like the one when I first signed up for that site. We were on a video call. I could see her in her small apartment. The city lights blurred out the window behind her. I was sitting right here, in this same chair. She was laughing about something I'd said, and then she just stopped, and her face got serious. She said, "David, I feel like I know your heart, but I have never held your hand. This is not enough for me. I want to see you. I want you to come to Bucharest." My first thought was, you're crazy. A 61-year-old man doesn't just fly to Romania to meet a woman half his age he met on the internet. That's the kind of thing you see on TV, and the guy is always a punchline. I hesitated. I probably said something non-committal like, "Wow, Anca, that's a big step." But she was ready for that. She leaned into the camera, and her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Are you afraid, my bear? Don't be. I will be here. I just want to show you my world, to see if what we have on this screen is real." After the call ended, I couldn't sit still. I started pacing the apartment. The sensible part of me, the trucker who triple checks his load before pulling out, was screaming that this was a bad idea. But another part of me, the part that had been dormant for 35 years, was buzzing. It was the thrill of the unknown. So I did what I always do when I have a problem. I broke it down into numbers. I went online and looked up flights. A round trip from Dayton to Bucharest, about 14 hours of travel, was $1,200. Okay, not nothing, but I'd spent more than that on a set of new tires. Then I looked at hotels. A nice one, a Hilton right in the city center, was about $160 a night. For a week, that's another $1,100. Add in food, maybe a few hundred for sightseeing. All in, I figured a week-long trip would cost me maybe $3,000. And I just stood there, looking at that number. $3,000. I had $450,000 in the bank. It was less than 1% of my net worth. And I asked myself, what's the risk? The risk is I lose $3,000 and have a lonely, embarrassing vacation. That's the downside. But the upside? The upside was that maybe, just maybe, this was real. The upside was a future that wasn't just me, alone in this apartment, waiting for the clock to run out. The upside was proving to myself that my ex-wife was wrong, that I could be something more than a wallet on wheels. I didn't tell a soul. Who would I tell? My old driving buddies? They'd laugh me out of the bar. My daughter? She'd worry herself sick. This was mine. It felt like the first decision I had made for myself, and not for my job or my family, in my entire life. I thought about it for 2 more days. And on the 3rd day, I opened my laptop, went to the airline's website, and bought the ticket. As I clicked Confirm Purchase, my heart was pounding in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the feeling of an engine turning over after a long, cold winter. It was the feeling of finally, after all these years, starting to move again. The moment the plane touched down in Bucharest, it felt like my life had been shot in color after 60 years of black and white. I walked out of the airport into the cool Romanian air, my heart hammering against my ribs, scanning the crowd for a face I'd only ever seen on a screen. And then I saw her. She was even more beautiful in person. She didn't just wave, she ran. She threw her arms around my neck, right there in front of everybody, and buried her face in my shoulder. "My bear," she whispered, and the sound of her voice, not through a speaker but right there in my ear, it was like a switch being flipped. Every doubt I had, every bit of common sense, it all just evaporated. That week was a blur. She took me everywhere. We walked through Haristral Park, with its huge, calm lake. We sat in little cafes in the old town, drinking strong coffee and eating pastries I couldn't pronounce. For the first time, I wasn't just a tourist. I felt like I belonged somewhere. She held my hand everywhere we went. She'd introduce me to people, waiters, shopkeepers, with this proud look on her face. "This is David," she'd say. "My American." She made it sound like a title. And I paid for everything, but it didn't feel like I was being used. It felt like I was finally using my money for what it was for, to build a life, to be happy. $100 for a nice dinner didn't feel like an expense. It felt like an investment in a memory. I was a man of the world, a man with a beautiful woman on his arm. I was the man I always secretly hoped I could be. When I flew back to Ohio, the silence in my apartment was 10 times worse than before. It was a tomb, but now I had a lifeline. We talked every day, making plans. And then, about a month after I got back, the first test came. She called me, and she was crying. Her mother, she said, had a terrible tooth infection and needed emergency dental surgery. The cost was $4,500. The old me, the trucker who counted every penny, might have hesitated. But the new me, David the world traveler, the man with a future in Bucharest, I didn't even blink. This is what you do for family. This is what a good partner does. I went to the bank the next morning and wired the money. It felt good. It felt right. After that, the requests became smaller, more normal. Her laptop broke, and she needed a new one for her university studies. $1,500. A few weeks later, her landlord was suddenly raising the price of her apartment, and she needed $2,000 to help with a new deposit. Each time, I sent the money. Each transfer was another thread in the rope that was tying me to her. They were all just investments in our future, small down payments on the life we were going to build. I wasn't being scammed. I was being a supportive partner. I was proving I could be trusted. The calls got more and more intense. The distance felt more and more unbearable. Then, one night, she laid it all out. Her voice was thick with emotion. "My love," she said, "why are you living alone in cold Ohio? Why are we wasting this time apart? Move here. Come be with me." I started to give her the practical objections, the visa, the money, but she cut me off. "It is simple," she said. "For $120,000, we can buy a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment near Hardworking Park, all cash. No mortgage, no rent. It will be ours. My heart, what is mine is yours. You won't just be visiting. You will be home. You will be a king here." $120,000. That was the price of a home. Not just an apartment, a home. The end of loneliness. The end of rent checks. It sounded like so much money, but then I did the math again. I've always been a man who trusted numbers. My 401k and the house money added up to $450,000. After buying the apartment, I'd still have $330,000 left. That was more than enough to live on comfortably in Romania, especially with no rent or mortgage. It wasn't a risk, it was a strategy. The smartest investment I could possibly make. I was buying a future, wholesale. So I did it. I called my financial advisor, a guy I'd spoken to maybe 3 times in 20 years, and told him to liquidate everything. The stocks, the bonds, all of it. He tried to talk me out of it, asked if I was sure, if I'd thought it through. I remember feeling almost angry with him. How could he understand? He saw a balance sheet. I saw a life waiting for me. I flew to Bucharest on a one-way ticket, this time with my life savings converted into a number on a screen, ready to be deployed. The plan was simple. I'd be there on a tourist visa, and Anca had an uncle, a lawyer she said, who would handle all the paperwork for my residency once I was there. It was all so easy. We found the apartment in a week. It was perfect. A 2-bedroom place with a small balcony overlooking a quiet street, just a short walk from Hardworking Park. It was real. I could touch the walls. I could see us living there. When it came time to do the deal, we sat in the lawyer's office. He was a stern-looking man who didn't speak a word of English. Anca did all the talking. She turned to me, holding my hand, and explained the situation. "My heart," she said, her voice full of sincerity. "The lawyer says because you are not a citizen and on a tourist visa, it will be much, much faster if we put the apartment in my name for now. It is just for the papers. Once your residency is approved, we can add you. It is just a formality. What is mine is yours, you know this. And what do you do in that moment? Do you say no? Do you accuse the woman you crossed the world for of lying to you, in front of her uncle? The old David, the trucker, the guy who read the fine print on every contract, was screaming inside my head. But I didn't listen to him. I was the new David, the man who takes a leap of faith. To doubt her then would have been to admit the whole thing was a lie. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't face that. So I nodded. I smiled. And I authorized the transfer of $120,000. I watched my life's work, the equity from a home I'd spent 30 years paying for, vanish into an account with her name on it. And she kissed me, right there in the lawyer's office, and said, "Welcome home, my love." We hadn't been in the new apartment for a month before the next dream was born. We were walking in the old town one evening, and she pointed to a shuttered storefront. "Imagine, David," she said, her eyes sparkling. "A little coffee shop. Our coffee shop. You and me. Something to do together." It was brilliant. It was the perfect answer to the question I hadn't let myself ask. What was I going to do all day? The idea of having a project, a business, of being a provider again, but this time with her, it was intoxicating. The numbers came quickly. $70,000 for the renovations. Her cousin, a contractor, would do the work. $40,000 for the high-end espresso machine, the furniture, the licenses. $110,000. The business, of course, would also have to be in her name, for simplicity, for the same legal reasons. By now, the logic was familiar. It made a strange kind of sense. Another investment in our future. Another wire transfer. For the next year, that apartment was my home, and that failing coffee shop was my job. Her cousin was there every few days, hammering something, making a mess, but the work never seemed to get done. The weeks turned into months. The $70,000 for renovations was gone, but there were always new problems. The plumbing is older than we thought, she'd say. We need another $10,000. The city is asking for a new permit, she'd explain. It's $5,000. My bank account, the one that had seemed bottomless, was getting noticeably smaller. I was covering everything. Our rent-free life was costing me thousands a month in fine dining, new clothes for her, weekend trips to the mountains. I started asking questions. Not accusations, just questions. Anca, when do you think the cafe will actually be ready? Honey, can we look at the receipts from the contractor? Every time, it was like I'd slapped her. Her face would change. The warmth would vanish, replaced by a cold, wounded look. You don't trust me, she'd say, her eyes filling with tears. After everything, you think I am trying to cheat you? You sound like your wife. A manager, not a partner. Always counting, always controlling. It was a knife in the gut, and she knew exactly where to twist it. The fear of being that man again, the boring provider, the human ATM, it was stronger than my fear of losing the money. So I backed down. I'd apologize. I'd tell her of course I trusted her. And to prove it, I'd take her on a shopping spree or send another $5,000 to her cousin for some new, imaginary problem with the renovation. I was paying to prove I trusted her, and the price kept going up. The end came faster than a skid on black ice. I was down to my last $20,000. That was it. Everything else was gone. The coffee shop, our beautiful dream, had become a black hole, and I was standing at the event horizon. I knew, with the kind of certainty that sits cold and heavy in your stomach, that I couldn't send another dollar. There were no more dollars to send. That night, I didn't ask. I told her, Anca, I said, my voice tight, we need to stop. The renovations, everything. The money is gone. There's only $20,000 left. She didn't look wounded this time. She looked bored, annoyed. So get more, she said, scrolling through her phone. Call your advisor. There is no more, I said, my voice louder than I intended. That's what I'm telling you. It's gone. $430,000. Gone. What happened to it? She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes cold. We built a life. Did you think it was free? The business. I pushed, my heart hammering. It was supposed to be a business. It's just a hole in the wall with wires hanging out. Where's the $110,000, Anca? She stood up. The act was over. The soft, loving woman I knew was gone, and in her place was someone I didn't recognize at all. You are just like her, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. A miserable accountant. You want to see the receipts? You think I stole from you? After everything I gave you. She walked to the bedroom door. I can't be with a man who doesn't trust me. A man who counts every penny like a dragon on his gold. I am leaving. And she did. She packed a small bag and walked out the door. She didn't slam it. She closed it softly behind her, and the click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I didn't sleep. I just sat in that apartment, our apartment, and waited. I thought she'd be back in the morning. I thought she'd call. She didn't. The next afternoon, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't her. It was her cousin, the contractor. He wasn't alone. 2 other men, big men, were with him. They filled the doorway. He didn't smile. He just looked at me. Anca is my wife, he said in clear, perfect English. Not my cousin. This is her apartment. I just stared at him. The words didn't make sense. Wife? He took a step inside. The other 2 men followed, standing behind him. You are trespassing. You have 24 hours to leave. If you are still here tomorrow, we will remove you. I went to the police. I remember trying to explain the whole story to a tired-looking officer behind a plexiglass screen. He listened, nodding slowly. When I was done, he typed something into his computer, made a phone call, and then turned back to me. "Sir," he said, his voice flat, "I have the ownership documents for the apartment at this address. It was purchased by Anca. The business license for the cafe at this address is also in her name. You have no legal right to either property. This is a domestic dispute. We cannot help you." He slid a piece of paper under the glass. It was a copy of the deed to the apartment. Her name was there, in black and white. My name was nowhere. It was all real. The trap I had refused to see was now the only reality that existed. I walked out of that police station into the Bucharest evening. The city that had seemed so full of color and life just felt gray. I went back to the apartment. My key still worked. Her husband, was a man of his word. I had 24 hours. I packed my suitcase with the few clothes I owned. Then I sat down at the laptop I had bought her, went to the airline website, and used my emergency credit card, the only money I had left in the world that she hadn't touched, to buy a one-way ticket back to Dayton, Ohio. The total was $1,350. I clicked confirm. The engine that had roared to life 18 months ago had finally ceased. I wasn't moving anymore. I was just falling. And that's how I ended up back in Dayton, Ohio. It's been 7 months now. The apartment is smaller than the one I left and a lot quieter. My net worth is $8,400 plus whatever I can make delivering food to people in the same neighborhoods where I used to dream about retirement. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it's a number, and I've learned, the hard way, that you have to pay attention to the numbers. I've had a lot of time to think on these late-night drives, a lot of time to go over the map and see where I took the wrong turn. And if you're listening to this, if any part of my story sounds familiar, I need you to hear me now. I'm not a therapist or an expert. I'm just the guy who drove off the cliff, and I can tell you exactly what the road looks like on the way down. First, there is no such thing as a formality when it comes to your money or your property. Not in another country, not anywhere. When Anca and her lawyer told me to put the apartment in her name just to make things faster, I knew it felt wrong. The old me, the trucker, would have stopped everything right there. But I wanted to be the trusting partner, so I nodded. That nod cost me $120,000 and a roof over my head. The moment your name is not on the paper, it is not your property. It's a gift. Don't ever give away something you can't afford to lose, just to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. Second, the small requests for money are never the end of it. They're the beginning. They are tests. That $4,500 for her mother's dental surgery? That wasn't a crisis for her. It was a test for me. They're checking to see if the spigot works. Every time you say yes to a small amount, you are training yourself to say yes to a bigger one. You're not being a supportive partner. You are being qualified as a target. And the last thing, the most important one, you have to listen to that voice in your gut. That voice that's telling you something is too good to be true. I spent 35 years listening to that voice. It kept me safe on icy roads and got my cargo delivered on time. But I was so desperate to not be that boring, predictable guy my ex-wife left that I shut him up. I ignored my own best judgment because I wanted the fantasy to be real. Don't make that mistake. The person you've been your whole life, the one who earned that security, he's not the enemy. He's the only one who has your back. So that's it. That's the story of how I traded a secure future for 18 months of a fantasy. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because you might be where I was, a little lonely, a little insecure, wondering if your best days are behind you. Let me tell you, they are not. But they will be if you trade your life savings for a pretty face that tells you what you want to hear. Before you ever send $1, listen to that little voice in your gut. It's smarter than you think, and it's the only friend you can be sure is on your side.